Good morning, everyone. This is Rama On Writing coming to you live from a beautiful, soon-to-dawn Kailua Kona, Hawaii. Happy Valentine's Day to everyone. I know I'm a couple of days earlier, one day earlier, and then we have President's Day on Monday, so we get a little bit of holiday time. You know, this is my second to last webinar from Hawaii, and then I'll be back in Arizona. We have a huge retreat happening the first week in March. And if anyone is having thoughts, second, third, or fourth thoughts about wanting to show up, you can contact Mary, and she can put you into the group. I'll be doing a remote, so you don't even have to leave your home if you want to write that second or third book or finish the first book. So that's an option for you. And Tom does offer a great price for the authors in our Publish Now program as returning authors. Today we are lucky and fortunate to have Jean Guthrie on board with her freshly released book, Mystical Aria. And, you know, she's sitting at number 3 in Kindle and her print version. So I would love if all of you would go and purchase her Kindle. I bet you that this group alone can put her over the top for that category. It does take a little bit of time to move from, you know, number 3 up to number 1, and I know it took me about 4 days before I hit my number 1. So I'm sure that Jean will get there. With that said, I'm going to give the floor to Jean. Jean, first off, tell us who you are, kind of what you do, and why you wrote a fantasy novel about aliens.
Good morning, Rama, and happy almost Valentine's Day to you as well. It's a very good question about why I wrote about aliens. I was in a webinar, actually a weekend retreat with Tom Bird and David Thalberg, and I was working on a book about a young girl and a spirit guide. And I had been working on that for a while, but while I was in that retreat, this different voice started talking to me as I was writing and just sort of took over the work that I was doing. And her name was Aria Veneer. This girl here in the book, Aria Veneer, and she loves to write at her tea diary. So what happened was I started journaling with this new character, Aria. And instead of working with a spirit guide, she was really interested in stars and in aliens. And it turns out that she is psychic enough to be able to remote view intergalactically. And she calls these aliens to visit her at her home in Virginia Beach. And I did not consciously set out to talk about aliens or write about aliens, but it turned out to work because I wanted to have a positive, uplifting novel. And so I needed a group of people who had already reached a point of peace in their lives that they could teach love, prosperity, and infinity to Aria, her friend, and her sister. We really don't have that on Earth. We really don't have a collective consciousness that's at peace, so we have no war. So it turned out that I needed to have the aliens who were spiritually advanced much further than we are in our lives and able to teach the kids.
You know, it sounds monumental to me. You know, whenever we talk about world peace, we have our work cut out for us. There's no doubt about that. Now, Jean, you must really be a visionary because you went out and you actually hired a cover artist to create this vision, but the cover artist needed something to start with. So you must have had a clear sense. Can you explain that a little bit? Because I think there's a lot of authors in our program that don't really have that image or don't know how to get that image onto their cover. So maybe just talk a little bit about how that occurred.
Sure, Rama. So I'll also give you a little bit of background about the image of the aliens. My first image of the aliens looked more like black and white snowmen, and they glided, they didn't have legs. When my novel went to a style editor, she said that the aliens were too far-fetched, that I really needed to make them look a little more human. And that was about the time that Avatar was a very popular movie. And so she suggested making the aliens weird, but a little more humanoid like the characters in Avatar. And so I went back to Aria, went back to sort of the writing sketch pad with a blank sheet of paper and thought, okay, what would these aliens look like? They're spiritually advanced, they're technologically advanced. And I thought about the shape, sort of that egg shape with, gold coming out that you see in so many old drawings, and in particularly Catholic churches. And so the aliens turned out, in my mind, aliens turned out having gold skin and having spiked hair. And their spiked hair is actually whiskers. So I had a very clear vision in my mind on what the aliens looked like. They were, in a sense, beautiful people who just had gold skin, 8 fingers, really long hands, really long legs, long toes, almost amphibious. So I had that vision in my mind, and I wrote that vision in the book. So I had a very descriptive information about how the aliens looked and how they walked and how their whiskers did different things according to their emotions. And that was all in the book. So when I went through the first round with the exterior proof, it was very hard for them to find exactly how my characters looked out on internet pictures, because basically there wasn't anything out there. It was a very, very unique look. So I decided to hire an illustrator to draw the aliens the way that I envisioned them. Unfortunately, the best I can do with drawing are stick figures, so I couldn't draw it myself, and I couldn't capture it in a photograph because there really isn't anything that looks like them on Earth. I interviewed and I looked at samples from 3 different illustrators. The first 2 just had it totally wrong. They look more like slee stacks from Land of the Lost. They look like what people think of aliens, ugly, green, monster-like, because that's how I feel a lot of movies depict aliens. And so that's the vision that a lot of people have of aliens. However, my spiritually and technologically advanced aliens are beautiful people. Well, they're beautiful people, but beautiful aliens. So I called a friend of mine who is an illustrator. I said, this is what I need. Who do you know who can do that? And he recommended Michelle Phillips. I met with her. She drew some samples, and I said, yes, you've got it. So we went round and round on what the aliens would look like. I had a very clear description in my mind of her palace, the Queen's palace. Because this isn't just any ordinary alien. This is a queen. The name of the alien is Galleons. So this is their Galleon queen, their queen supreme. And I had a very clear picture of what she looked like at the moment that Aria contacted her. So the cover really depicts the point of communication between Aria on Earth, writing at her tea diary. This unicorn receives a message on its golden horn, and the unicorn gallops to the queen and delivers Aria's message to the queen while she's on her throne in her palace. So that was the critical communication point in the book, in the second chapter of the book. And that was what I wanted depicted on the cover. And so I really needed to work with an illustrator one-on-one to achieve that point of the book on the cover. So what I would suggest is to, if you're writing a book that does require a very specific look and it's not out there on the internet, you don't have to, but you may want to think about having an illustrator draw it. Mine is it's a bit complicated. You may want to have a more simple look, a more clean look that provides a little bit mystery, but I really wanted that point of communication on the book, and I felt it was very important, especially after I went through 2 illustrators who drew very ugly aliens. I knew I needed to have the beautiful picture of the alien on the cover so that when people started reading the book, they already had that image of the alien in their head.
I admire anyone that can actually be a visionary like that. That's not one of my skill sets, so I admire all the authors that are writing fantasy novels, but especially when you have such a clear vision of this. Okay, now I know that we've talked about this a little bit, just you and I. I suspect that you have a sequel in the works, or maybe several sequels. Can you talk a little bit to that?
I would love to talk about my sequels. So the one I'm working on next is a book of diary entries that Aria, the psychic tween girl, writes while she's on the super spaceship in the first novel. And this sequel will go into more detail about her conversations with the alien princess. Her name is Lisam. And also about how Aria feels and how she reacts to certain things that happen to her on the super spaceship. There's also some new scenes that were not in the first book. So it is about a very specific point in time, maybe about a week of time that she's actually on the super spaceship and what happens to her that's not covered in the first book. So that's the next one coming out. The sequel after that is going to be both paperback and ebook. And it will be about a tragedy that happens on the Gallian home planet, and they need Aria to help them. And that's all I'm going to tell you. So the diary entries, I think I'm going to have just as an ebook because it will be a shorter book. And I want to get it out a little bit more quickly than it takes to get a paperback out.
Sounds good. And is your plan then to use the same artist for the covers that you've used for this first one?
Oh, absolutely. I've already started talking to her because I want to have the common look throughout the entire series.
Sounds good. Boy, I had one other question on the tip of my tongue, and now I've forgotten it. Of course, it takes a little bit of the. Now this is a young adult novel. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That is correct. It is young adult. However, when I started marketing it on Amazon, I found that the kids were buying it, and it's actually its best category is a children's category. So the tween protagonist is 12 years old, and I'm finding that kids from about age 8 to 14 are the target market. So the tweens, the protagonist's older sister is 15 years old, so the kids are between 12 and 15, and I'm finding that the characters in the book are between 12 and 15. So I'm finding that kids about age 8 to 15 are interested in the book.
Why write for that age group? Do you have an idea of why you did that?
That is a very good question, Rama. So my professional background is in mass communications and in information technology, and I entered information technology as a technical writer. And I think that my right brain just seriously needed a break from writing technical documents and then from managing projects and managing IT programs, just get away from all that technology world and get into a fantasy. And kids are really so much more imaginative than adults, and especially that age before they become teenagers, before their hormones start doing all kinds of crazy things. You know, kids are very imaginative, and that is an age where you can really make a difference with a kid as well. And I wanted to bring forth a book that made a difference in the world, made a difference in the next generation, and helped kids to make decisions based on love and not on fear. By the time, Rama, we are at our age, middle age, we've got so many habits, so many bad habits, and sometimes it's hard to change those. So I believe that if we start young and we aspire children, we aspire the next generation to be able to live in a world based on love and not having to kill and not having to fight and not having so much violence. I wanted to put something out there that was based on peace and not violence. I think there are so many movies and video games and books that have good versus evil, killing, violence, blowing up stuff. And sometimes I think kids are a little bit bombarded by violence, particularly at a young age.
Okay, now this is a loaded question here. Do you feel that there are aliens on our planet now, or do you feel that we're going to have communications with them shortly? Or give us a little insight.
I love the X-Files slogan, I want to believe. And what is so interesting is that there's so many phenomena on our planet that happened generations and centuries ago, between the pyramids at Egypt and crop circles and diagrams on different things. And not all of it can be explained by what we have on Earth today. And I will tell you basically three things that I definitely do believe. I believe we have an all-powerful creator. I'm trying to say omnipotent God. I believe in angels, and I believe in an infinite universe. And because I believe in an all-powerful creator and angels and an infinite universe, it would seem logical that there would be other life forms other than humans. That I really do believe. And a part of me wants to believe that aliens have been here on Earth. A part of me wants to believe that we are being watched. A part of me definitely believes that we are being watched by angels and by spirit guides. Whether you categorize those as aliens or not is up to your own personal belief. However, that fantasy part of me that gets away from computers and gets away from logic and IT really wants to believe that we will be visited if we have not been visited already, and if they aren't here already. But I'm sure that the government keeps it very quiet if they are.
Would you call this book a channeled book, or do you feel that you're writing it, or that some spirit is speaking through you to write this book?
That's a very good question. Do I feel it is channeled? Not totally. Do I feel that I get into a meditative state before I write? Yes, definitely. There are parts of the book that needed to work more from a conscious level, more from a how does this happen? For example, I have 2 women SEALs. I have Navy SEALs are in the book, and I needed to have one of them to be the mother of a young boy who's in the book, and I also wanted her to be a communications specialist. So, for example, I know women are not allowed to be SEALs at this time, So I had to think, all right, how can I explain in the book why this one particular woman in the year 2028, which is when the book takes place, what is special about her that gets her to be a Navy SEAL? So there had to be some logic in the book that wasn't necessarily channeled. However, when I first heard Aria's voice and she started to speak to me, I really felt that that was either some part of me or some part of consciousness that wanted to come through and say, hey, I've got this really cool story about these good aliens. Will you put it out on Earth?
Wow. Okay, this is going to be the last question. Then I'm going to shut down this recording and move over to the other computer so that we can actually have a shorter piece for you to utilize. What advice would you give to an author writing, a fantasy novel? Two real, questions I'm getting at is, advice for doing, but also advice for knowing when book one is done. What's book one and book two, essentially, or book three? How do you know when to draw the line?
Those are very good questions. What advice would I have, and how do I know when to draw the line that book one is finished? Those are actually two very internal questions. The advice I would have about your book is to write something that is passionate for you. If you just sit down and say, today I think I will write about unicorns and aliens and dragons because they're really cool and really popular, that's probably not going to work as well. I would suggest something that helped me the most, which is taking a lot of time to journal with the characters. I used to have a 20-minute trip on MARTA. MARTA is our transportation system in Atlanta. And I would take my writing pad and my music and my earphones, tone out, and just journal with the characters. Journal with Aria, with her sister, with her best friend, and get to know the characters. And ask them about their lives and about their stories and how do they interrelate. And let them tell me what the story is more than my telling them how they're supposed to act. And from that, I believe, evolved very deep characters. And then I would do that with the mother and father of Aria. And I definitely did it with the aliens. And so I would be able to discern the different voices, the different attitudes, the different weird things that the aliens would say. All of them are very unique because I got to know them and I got to understand how they related and built the story around that. I would also, before I answer the last question, put a plug that Mystical Aria, Seeking the Galleon Queen, has been reduced in price to only 99 cents for the Kindle version. So for just $1, you can help an author reach her goal of being an Amazon #1 bestseller today. Just $1, 99 cents. It's just a Washington. So that would be the mentoring, which is to know your characters very well. And when you know your characters well enough and they're telling you what their story is, they'll let you know when the book is finished. Usually, for me, I started crying.
Jean, you've been delightful. As I say, I want to cut this short so that you have a shorter piece to use, and then I am going to quit this computer, move on to another one. I want to thank you again. I also want to encourage all who are online to purchase the Kindle for 99 cents and help Jean hit her #1. She's very close to getting there, and as I say, this group alone could probably put her over the top. So everyone with a spare, dollar, let's help Jean move forward. Okay, Jean, thanks again, and I'm just going to stop this recording and change computers. So give me a second here.